Welcome back to The Secret Sauce with Sean, the show where we delve into the mind of a professional for a masterclass in what they do. Today, we've got another special guest prepared to share their story. As always, remember to like, share, and subscribe. And without further ado, we're going to get into who are you and what do you do?
My name is Jean-Baptiste Corbeil. I was encouraged to say my full name because apparently it's beautiful.
It is.
I go by JB Corbeil. I'm a loan officer, mortgage banker, however you want to put it, but I help people finance home loans, and I work for Guild Mortgage.
Welcome to the show, JB.
Thank you.
Dude, it's so good to have you here.
Today is our 1-year anniversary, actually having been acquired by Guild on this day. So a year ago, working for Academy Mortgage.
So this is your 1-year anniversary of becoming someone else's property.
That's right. And I never saw myself leaving Academy, but this was kind of forced on us, and we were a little bit concerned when it first happened and when it was first announced. But after we got to know the company, got to know the coworkers that had already been here at Guild, it felt like home really quickly. So
that's awesome.
I think it was a great move.
Yeah, that's always awesome. I guess let's kind of get into that. So obviously we know each other because we've done business together. And I was with you when you were at Academy. So I guess let's just start with that shift. What was Academy Mortgage, and like what's the difference now that you're at Guild?
Yeah, so Academy had been privately owned by an individual, Adam, and he and his family had owned the company since I think 1985. It was a small shop. They grew it properly over the years. They were very conservative with how they ran the company, and it was the first company I worked for. So when I got into this industry, Academy was the place I went. Over the years, things were going well. You had the COVID boom during 2020 through 2022, a lot of business, and then it sharply all dried up. And so in 23 and 24, they were tough years for mortgage, tough years for real estate in general, and for a lot of people. And Academy decided at that point, like, hey, we either have to dramatically change who we are and how we do business to stay in business, or we have to find a good buyer to acquire us and allow us to stick together as a team. And so that happened. We got that announcement in 2024. And we were surprised to hear that we were all sticking together. So all the underwriters that we worked with, processors, everybody.
So the entire team shifted from Academy to Guild. That's so rare in a company acquisition.
Very rare. We were grateful. No pay structure changes. In fact, there were some retention bonuses handed out, which was kind of cool to see. And
hey, you got paid?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
you did.
It was nice to see that they cared enough to recognize, hey, this person's producing well. We don't want him to shift companies just because he's being forced into this new company. So yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so you're at Guild Mortgage currently. What is a lender? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, so my favorite quote about what a lender does is, I solve problems you never knew you had in ways you wouldn't understand. That's on a coffee mug, and that's functionally what I do the day-to-day. But to speak layman's terms, my job is to seek out individuals that are looking to buy a house, refinance a house, build a house, make sure that they're qualified for the loan that they're trying to get. That's just rigorous documentation, questions asking, putting together a full file.
Quickly, what is regress documentation, just so we can put a term to?
So requesting documentation. And then reviewing it all to make sure it's accurate. So when people submit an app, they can put whatever they want in the app. It's not to say that they're lying or that they're misleading us into how much money they make or what have you.
Unintentional wrong information.
Exactly. And more so, where we really get into the weeds is lenders have to calculate income a certain way, and it just gets...
We had this conversation.
Yes, we have had this conversation. It gets complicated unnecessarily, and for most people, it's over their head, and they don't want to hear about it, but we got to get it figured out for their goal of buying a house.
100%.
Yep.
And I would like to take this moment to publicly apologize to you for how difficult of a client I was in the past.
Oh, you're fine.
I send you so many questions. But I mean, obviously... I do it with the full intention of using you in the next deal.
Yeah.
We will buy more property. So I know it benefits you, but it's just like, sometimes I'm like, oh man, am I abusing this relationship a little bit?
I love questions. Questions are not a problem at all. Honestly, you're a great customer. And I mean, I'm fortunate to have a lot of good customers. Every once in a while, I'd say like once a year, you get just a brutal transaction where technically it's difficult. The personalities involved are difficult, whether it's the buyer, the seller, the realtor. And that makes it tough, but it's far and few between.
So you do get the ones where literally like the entire what I would say the entire project is literally just a dumpster fire. Like across the board,
Yes.
it's just bad.
Yep.
And you're like, okay, this is a practice in patience and nothing more at this point.
Exactly, and honestly, those are the best ones to get. Even though I'm not hoping for more, they are what build your character. They really stretch your capacity to pull out that patience and pull out that understanding and listen better and problem solve harder. So I don't mind those, and they really make up for the deals where they're so easy that you almost feel guilty getting them closed and getting them paid because they took minimal effort. The customer was great. Perfect finances, simple to document. I mean, those you're always happy to get, but at the same time, you're like, I'm getting paid pretty well for this, and I feel like I didn't put in a ton of work. So when you get that difficult customer, it's like karma, and it makes up for it, and then it all evens out in the end. So it all averages
Perfect.
out. Yeah.
I loved what you said there. I want to kind of revisit that a little bit. So you would say that that colloquialism, which I hope is the right term, the comments will flame me in the chat if it's wrong. But the idea that you get more, you learn more out of failure than you do success. It's not necessarily a failure for you. You don't fail. You only 100% close. But you've learned more from the difficult clients than you have from the successful ones by far.
100%. So I started my career in South Texas, and
Perfect.
Yes.
I wanted to get into this.
good. It definitely plays into what we're talking about now.
Let's go. Let's hear the journey.
So I'm born and raised in South Texas. If you know anything about South Texas, it has great food, great beaches, but it's not the most financially successful place in the country. In fact, it ranks top in poverty and things of that nature.
Are you talking like Corpus Christi area?
Further south, Brownsville, on the border to Mexico.
Bless you. Where's that?
It is the last stop before you're in Mexico.
Is there a big sign outside the town that says the last stop before you're in Mexico?
No, I think the official phrase is like on the border by the sea.
Okay.
Something like that. And it's evolved now that SpaceX is there. It's like on the border by the sea, gateway to
SpaceX
Mars
is
or
there.
something. Yeah, that's where they're launching the Starship from. But
That's pretty cool.
being down there, you only know one way of life. And so I got into lending, and every customer was difficult. You can't tell because that's all you're being exposed to.
That's your world. It's the
yeah.
entire reality is difficult customers.
Yeah, it's like a fish in water, and you tell them, "Hey, what do you think about the water?" And they're like, "What? What's water?" It's all around you.
I've been breathing my entire life.
Exactly. And so a lot of those customers, their credit's not great. They have high debt to income ratios, not a lot of funds saved for closing. It's a challenge all the way around, but they're motivated to buy a house, and it's actually one of the most stable housing markets from a mortgage standpoint.
Yeah.
This demographic does not default on their mortgage.
Interesting.
They will pay that loan no matter what it takes. And that's something I appreciate about my community that I grew up in, is that having a house and having
It's a pride point.
It's a family. It's having a safe place for their family to live and grow up in is their number one priority. And so that means
There is something very
paying a
beautiful
mortgage.
about that.
Yes.
And like, I do think that it is very prevalent no matter what you do, that if you have a strong emotional tie or reasoning behind something, like your willpower to deliver is so high that failure becomes almost an impossibility.
Yes. Your intellect will give you the roadmap on how to get there, and the emotion behind the goal is what determines the speed in which you get there.
Yeah. Ooh, wise words by JB. Let's
Thank
put
you.
it on a shirt. Gotta get that on a coffee mug,
Yeah, no kidding.
So you're in, was it Brownsville?
Brownsville, Texas. Yep.
Okay. And just because I'm curious, small town, large town, like what
I'd say geographically it was about the size of Loveland, so kind of a medium sprawling town, not very densely populated, but also not a small town by any stretch. And so it did have a small town
feel,
like the vibe.
We
the
do
folks
have
there.
that in Colorado.
Yeah.
It is very weird that, like, even though I would say in our county, kind of, there is a decent bit of separation between areas, and I still see people I know all over the place.
Yeah.
In very odd circumstances.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you get this small town feel without the I can see inside your living room from my dining room.
Correct. Very, very true. Yep.
No, this is awesome. So, okay. And I think there was one more question I want to kind of dive into. What made you choose lending?
Yeah.
Because you didn't really hit on that. You were like, I'm in Brownsville.
Yeah.
I'm going to do lending. How? What motivated you to do this? Because This was never even an option that was presented to me as a child.
Yeah, well, that's something I'll touch on as well.
Great.
So I was going to school originally for being an IT professional, networking and security. Originally, I tried programming. I took one semester of programming. I absolutely hated it, realized that it was not my forte and didn't want to do it. So I switched to networking and security, which is IT, supporting computer systems, networks. I got a job in high school in that industry without a formal education, and I was going to school concurrently. At some point, it made sense for me to just drop out of school and spend all my efforts on
I love
work.
it. I'm not anti. Let me be clear. A lot of people are going to watch the first episodes. They're going to think I'm anti-college. I'm not anti-college, but you only should go to college if what you are doing is directly necessary and like related to that, like your career choice, and two, if you are set on that career choice, because the reality is a lot of people go to college and they do not work in the career that they thought they were originally going to work in.
Oh, yeah.
And the problem with that is that if you're not using your degree for what you're doing, then you didn't need your degree, and college is expensive, guys.
Yes, it's expensive and it's financed most of the time.
Right.
I was lucky
Similar
enough,
to housing.
Yes, similar to housing. I was lucky enough to where my parents just said, "Hey, if you're going to school, we know you're a responsible individual. You're not going to make irresponsible choices. We will pay for your school as long as you're doing well and as long as you continue to work." So I was doing that. I made that decision. You know what? I have to quit one of these things because I was pretty much overwhelmed. I was working full time at that point, going to school part time. I was taking night classes. And I was like 19.
It's a very unsavory. I did a little bit of that in my own story, and it's a very unsavory feeling when you're doing that, when you're trying to work and going to school at the same time, especially if you're working full time and going to school part time.
Yeah.
There's just only so much that a human can do and take.
Yeah, and you naturally over time you develop these abilities and skills to compartmentalize or manage stress better. At that time, I was barely learning those skills, so it was rough. I decided to drop out of school, spend all my efforts developing my career. Became the IT director of a small IT company, probably around 20 years old.
Wow, that's young.
Yeah,
because you're an IT director. Like, this is not an entry level position by any means.
Not at that point. But what I realized was I was still burning the candle at both ends. I was in charge of way more than emotionally I could support. I was just exhausted all the time. I was not getting paid great. And so I started looking at alternative options. And I was interested in finance. Around that time, my boss at the IT company was like, "Hey, you got to learn about finance. You got to learn about money, investing, all these things. Don't do what I did. Don't get into your eyeballs up into debt and then have problems." He said, "You have to do this or you're fired." And he was probably mostly joking, but I took him seriously. So I
would.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like when you're young and impressionable at that age, someone says, "Or you're fired."
Yeah.
You listen, your ears perk up.
Yep, especially because it was coming from his personal experience. So started looking into financing. I realized it was a puzzle. It was like a riddle to be solved, and it was fascinating to me. So I learned everything I could, read everything I could online, followed blogs and forums.
And when you say financing, that is a particular term. Like, most people would just say finances or money, but financing is different. Could we give a little bit of a definition of that for the people that may not be able to discern the difference?
It was mostly personal finances. So mainly he said, "I want you to have a budget. I want you to understand compound interest. I want you to understand the dangers of debt. I want you to understand how the stock market works. What's a bond?" All those things.
Sweet. Okay.
And I found this great blog, Mr. Money Mustache. Interestingly, he was based out of Northern Colorado before I had ever been here. So I absorbed all this information. I mean, everywhere I'd go, if I had a moment, I'd read about it. And that got me thinking when I got burnt out at my job, I want to go into finance next.
Yeah.
So I looked at a few options. I was like, I could become a financial planner, like with Edward Jones or one of those companies, or I could go into lending. I didn't know anything about lending. I knew a little bit about financial planning. Talking to my mother-in-law, and both my in-laws are in real estate.
When did you get married in this process? Just out of sheer curiosity.
That's a pretty important thing to bring up.
Well, I mean, you just went from, like, I was going to college, I had a job, I was the director of IT. Now I have a mother-in-law. I'm like,
now I have a mother-in-law.
We skipped a crucial moment here.
You're absolutely right. Continuity is important. So at 20, not year, but age, I was 21 when I met my future wife. She came over to a house party that my cousin was throwing. We were my cousin.
As all good relationships begin.
She was a waitress at Texas Roadhouse. Anyways, I had a girlfriend, and that did not last long.
As girlfriends do.
Unrelated to me meeting my future wife. And so then we started dating.
Solid choice in wording with this being on the internet.
It just so happened to go that way. We started dating, became serious pretty quickly, and I was never one to delay, so I wasn't worried about not getting, or I wasn't worried about getting married. I wanted to get married when I found the right person, and she definitely felt like the right person. So we get married. We're probably 23 years old, and then I get to know her family really well through that process. Mom's a realtor, successful. Dad's a home builder, custom home builder, successful. And so they're really the ones that helped me choose and get guided into lending.
Okay. So, and this is great. So we'll, just for the audience, a little bit of continuity as we were discussing. You were working this job as an IT director. Your boss came to you and said you needed to learn about financing. Ooh, getting ahead of myself. And then that led you to a conversation with your mother-in-law specifically about lending.
Yep.
And that brings us to this part of your story.
Yeah. So I remember this conversation clear as day. My mother-in-law was stressed out about a deal she was working as a realtor, and it was an apartment complex she was getting purchased for her customer. And I said, well, what kind of work goes into that? She's like, we have to review all the leases. We have to see if there's any repairs. We have to get it priced right, all this stuff. I said,
I don't envy the position of a realtor.
I don't either. But then I asked her the next most important question. What do you get paid on a deal like this?
Oh, yeah. Like the moment you're like, well, what's the money look like?
Yeah, I was just curious because she'd been working nonstop for 2 months on this transaction. And I was like, 2 months is a long time to work on one deal. Like, what does that pay like? Mm-hmm. And she was like, well, about $30,000. And at the time, that was my full annual salary as an IT person who was working 9 to 5. I was also on call. So sometimes I'd have to work on the weekends. It wasn't common, but stressed out all the time, understaffed because it's a small company. And I just thought for a second, wow, if I could pour my heart into work and make $30,000 in 2 months, like what does the whole year look like if I put in that same amount of effort?
I am heavily questioning where I'm sitting right now. Please continue. But
yeah, and this was before.
I know
this was before inflationary doom. So $30,000 back then was even more money than it is now.
So, but that technically, and I love defining this. So, as an apartment building, was that technically a commercial deal?
It was a commercial deal for her. Yeah.
Okay, and this question came up earlier in my head. I don't mind taking a little bit of a tangent here. Deal with it, audience. Do you, at Guild Mortgage, do you guys only do residential or do you guys also do commercial?
Only residential.
And then maybe at this time, let's just explain the difference between the two, just for the people watching so we can give them a little bit of education for free. You're welcome.
Yeah. So interestingly, we focus only on residential. We only do residential. We do not do any commercial. And the major difference is the number of units is one of the metrics to measure that. So any real estate that has more than 4 occupiable units, so a quadplex.
Oh, 4. Interesting.
Is the maximum for residential. As soon as you go into unit 5, you're looking at a commercial property. Okay. Now, that's the biggest difference. There are nuances, like you could technically finance a single family home with a commercial loan, but you don't have to. And in fact, it's most advantageous to use a mortgage to finance a single family home if it's an investment property.
And since we're here, I know this is going to come up. Can you just give a basic definition to a mortgage? Because I think sadly with the time we're in, a lot of people don't even own homes.
So mortgage is Latin for death promise or death commitment. So if you ever wonder if you have to keep paying your mortgage after you're dead, yeah, they're still going to get their money. And so that's what...
Wait, was that real?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were kidding.
No, that's actually...
This is 100% real.
Yes.
Wow.
So a mortgage is a loan that's collateralized, meaning it's tied to a real asset. The asset is the house. And so the unique thing about it is if you don't pay your mortgage, the bank can take back the house and get it sold and make their money back. You say, well, that's a bad thing. Actually, it's a good thing for the consumer because that debt is tied to a real asset and can be resold by the bank if they have to seize it. It means that your interest rate is much lower because there's lower risk involved. If they lent that money for your house and they could not seize that house, if you stop making your payments, your interest rate would be double or triple, like credit cards, right? Credit cards, they're not going to come and take your
23% interest rates.
Exactly, because they have to build in the cost of defaulting, people not making their payments, people just completely going into collections, and that's what rate is. The rate is an assessment of risk. In addition to the market rate.
Yeah, and since we're here, free piece of advice, if you have credit card debt and you're wondering what to do with money, and I'll just tell you right now, the first thing you should do is eliminate your credit card debt
100%.
Altogether.
That's one of the first things you learn in personal finance.
It's the most aggressive thing. There are going to be some younger people who are watching this, and I'll tell you this right now. If you make the mistake of getting into credit card debt, the first thing you should do is get yourself out of credit card debt. And I don't know what price you're going to have to pay to get that done in terms of your emotional health, your work-life balance. But I'll be real with you, the sooner you do it, the more the script will flip for you and your life will turn extremely advantageous. So
Unless your investment is returning a greater interest rate than the interest on your credit, you should be paying down debt and not investing. And
Yeah.
it's an unfortunate and uncomfortable hard truth for people getting into personal finance for the first time because they may be excited to buy stocks or bonds or what have you, mutual funds.
Right.
But unless your credit card debt is paid off or you have the opportunity to make more money in an investment, don't prioritize investing.
And I think this is super pertinent. So school loans, many people have school loans. So would that advice for you be the same, that unless you're making more on this investment in interest than you would by paying down your school debt, realistically you should be eliminating your school debt before you're looking at investing in assets?
Yes, that can be a contentious topic, and unfortunately, the government has made it more complicated because they have gone back and forth between forgiving debt, not forgiving debt. There's programs that can allow for student loan forgiveness. The problem with that is it sends mixed signals to the consumer, to the person that has the debt, and so they're like, well, why would I pay off a debt that maybe this president or the next president is just going to wipe away when I can invest that money, go on a vacation, buy a house?
Right.
So I feel like messaging around the treatment of certain debts is really not helping the consumer and may lead them down the wrong path.
I personally am always going to promote, just if you borrowed money from someone,
Yeah.
the right thing to do is to pay them back.
Oh, yeah.
Whether or not you agree to that, that's fine or not. But
And the last thing I want to say on the topic of risk and how interest rates are established and all that stuff, one of the reasons why people complain that student loans can't be forgiven during bankruptcy, or even if you pass away, they may be passed on to another person. That was so that they could offer a no income, no asset, no job loan of potentially unlimited amounts at a low interest rate. The lenders who are putting their neck on the line to lend that money have no idea what your capacity is to repay, and they're giving you a very, very good rate. And so unless there was some protection for them, right, the inability to dismiss it in bankruptcy, they would never have done that.
right,
So
there is no other way.
there is no other way to do it. Yep.
100%.
So-
Thanks for giving. We did go on a little bit of a rabbit trail there, but I think we got a lot of important information out that the average person is going to heavily benefit from.
Yeah.
So, and I have done a good job of earmarking where our conversation was so we
Good.
can get right back into it. So, your mother does this incredible $30,000 commercial deal, and you're like, wow, $30,000 2 months. That's something I can really get behind. And once again, I am sitting in this chair really questioning what I'm doing with my life because I'm talking to you right now, and I ain't even getting paid for this.
Yeah.
But, and equally, you're here and you're not getting paid for this, so thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
That being said, what's next? Like you have this conversation with your mother. What happened after? Or mother-in-law, sorry.
Mother-in-law, yeah. So she was like, well, you should look into getting into lending. And I was like, I've heard of it. I don't really know what that is. What's involved? And she was like, well, I have some people you can talk to. I thought, great. That's a great way to figure out what this is, what it means. So she recommended I talk to a couple different people. I talked to them. One of the folks did not call me back. I reached out to him. He didn't call me back. The other one did. And that other gentleman actually gave me a couple books to read. They were mainly on sales. And
Do you remember the books?
Go Giver was one of them. And
It's a great book.
Yeah, it was a great book, Bo Berg. And then 7 Levels of Communication. I really feel like it was better targeted towards a realtor, but it was helpful from a sales perspective and what's effective in communicating and trying to sell. So I really appreciated that. But then the other loan officer found out that I was trying to get into lending, and he was very interested in maybe somehow getting my in-laws' business into his office because he had been after them for years.
This guy's smart.
So this is where the 3D chess starts, right? So he
Yeah.
sees that opportunity. He calls me back immediately, and he's like, hey, I'd love to meet with you. He meets with me, and he's like, by the way, our corporate headquarters has a great program for aspiring loan officers to get trained from couch to loan officer.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So I was like, tell me more. He mentions how long the program is, where it is. It's in Salt Lake City, Utah, or Draper, just outside of Salt Lake. He said, 6 weeks long. We'll train you how to originate loans, how to sell. You get paid a wage. I wasn't even, at this point, I wasn't expecting to get paid. I thought it was something I had to go through on my own money.
You were willing to sacrifice for the payout at the end.
And I calculated
Beautiful.
the hourly rate, and it was about what I was getting paid in IT to learn a new skill and to go into a different career. So I was like, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah. Perfectly lateral move. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
For a vertical possibility shift?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes. And so I got all that information from him. Talked to my wife, obviously. She was actually hesitant, and for good reason. So her parents are both in real estate. This was in 2013, 14.
Oh, so it's right after the 2008 crash.
She got to see firsthand. She was in the front seat of her parents' real estate business going through the greatest hardship of their lives. She saw what it did to their relationship. Obviously, they stuck together, but she saw what it did to their finances. And she was like, you're getting into the career that my parents almost crashed and burned in. Ooh. Do we really want to do this? Ooh. And I was like, you know what? That's a really fair question, and I need to think about that. And ultimately, we decided that as long as we maintained a lower standard of living relative to how much I was earning in the good times and saved the difference, that it was a doable thing.
That is a brilliant piece of advice. Live within your means.
Yeah.
If you want to know more about it, hit me up.
and that's much easier said than done, because at the time I had always not earned a ton of money. So I'd always been frugal, especially when I found out about finance. And just to, clear the air, it is easy to get lost when that money starts pouring in. And
I can't imagine. I haven't had that moment.
Well, it's probably for the better, because honestly, those moments blind you to what's important, and they can get you on the path to elevating your lifestyle beyond what it should be because of ego, because of greed, because of all of the negative things that come with making more money sometimes. And so that's a natural drift. It is, and it has to be actively fought. And the second you let your guard down, things go the wrong direction.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I'm just putting that together. I mean, there was so many beautiful thoughts in that moment. So for you, it was definitely an exercise in discipline.
100%.
Is this something that you would? Well, we'll probably get into this later, but that's probably a good piece of advice for people that are interested in getting to any high-paying position. Is like the daily discipline. You don't practice things when it's hard. You practice when it's easy, so that when it's hard, you have that discipline built.
That's beautiful. Beautifully put. I always joke I'm not particularly good looking, not particularly intelligent, but I am stubborn as hell.
Well, I'll debate the good looking thing. I'll tell you, if your wife will take you on a date, we can catch a beer anytime.
When we got together, she had pretty bad eyesight when she was getting her LASIK. I was a little bit concerned. I was genuinely concerned. I was like, man, she's going to see me for the first time. Everything's fine still. It's been years, so. But the one thing,
there's no way. That's so crazy.
The one thing I am is stubborn, and in that comes a great deal of discipline. And it served me well. I mean, it's the slow and steady that wins the race, and that's discipline. So
100%. So you question whether or not you should. Obviously, you guys made the decision too. You went into this. It sounds like it's almost a financial university.
It was a program that was run by the company that was going to hire me. Okay. A training program. They had it was called the Mortgage Career Development Program, and it was the company looking to expand, try to hire some fresh blood, because I don't know if you know this about banking. A lot of bankers are older than middle age. They've been in the industry for decades. It's a very well-established career path, even if most people don't know about it. And so the industry was lacking fresh blood, and Academy Mortgage saw this as an opportunity to bring in fresh blood, people that showed promise in their community, that the loan officers locally knew and thought could be successful. So they relied on the loan officers in each individual branch to identify those people in the community and send them up to get trained.
So you're almost lucky, because it sounds like you were semi-hand-picked for this. This is not like a public opportunity you could have just necessarily applied for, which Correct. I'm sure some people did, and they would vet them out. But to a degree, you already had that letter of recommendation, so to speak, in your back pocket to go into this.
Yep, and I will get to this in a bit, because it's a pretty important. When we interview people today, we basically tell them, you don't want this job, it's extremely difficult, and we want to see if they'll fight us on that and push through, because the job is extremely difficult, especially to get started. And if they're not going to fight us on telling them that, hey, you shouldn't apply, this is a difficult job.
They don't have the spine.
They don't have the spine to succeed. And the first year, the attrition rate is like 80 to 90%. So 80 to 90% first year, people just stop. They quit because they're not making any money.
It just makes me want to do it. I have that ornery bone in my body.
You definitely have. The vibe I get from you is that you would absolutely make it successful. It would just be not fun the first year.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that's a kind thing to say, but it's only because I was even joking with my father about this the other day. He's like, I'm stubborn, and I'm like, I think I'm the only more stubborn person I know than you.
That's like my parents, yeah.
I just have no ability to quit. It's definitely been to my detriment at multiple times in my life. People are like, Sean, stop talking. Like, close your mouth, please, for the love of God.
You've heard those stories of people getting lost in the woods or in some frozen tundra, and then they'll eventually like try to walk to get help, and then they just sit down and die. Like they just quit.
Right.
And then, you know, they were like half a mile from a highway, like a major highway. And it's just, life's too short to quit. Like if you're going to do something, go all in and go all in until you can't anymore.
100%.
Yeah.
You had just finished up this financial opportunity, this university that you were kind of selected for, this program. What came next?
Next was departing from my lovely wife for 6 weeks, which was actually the first time we'd been apart that long. That was pretty difficult, but I was also excited about my new career opportunity. So I fly out to Salt Lake and take a transit to Draper, Utah, where our headquarters was, Academy Mortgage headquarters. And I meet up with a group of other people. So there's like 15 people in our class. We're all staying in the same extended stay hotel, and we're all walking to the actual headquarters, the Academy Mortgage headquarters, every day for class, Monday through Friday. So we show up, go down to the basement, and we have Clayton McDonald teaching this class. He was a loan officer, Mormon, in case you were wondering. And
You did say Salt Lake City, Utah. So I had the thought, but I wasn't going to bring it up, you know?
You know, when I first found out that the executive board and the owner were Mormon, I was actually kind of concerned about it. I was like, these are going to be some lame Christmas parties. They are nothing like that. They're like, hey, you all aren't Mormon. Have as much as you want to drink. Have as much as do whatever you want, basically, as long as you're doing your job and not breaking the law. So that was really cool. But Clayton,
like a good father. You
yeah,
know? Do whatever you want. Just don't die.
There you go. He was our instructor. We went through basically all of the information we would need to pass the licensing exam for becoming a mortgage lender. After the financial crisis, they made it a licensable career.
So this was like a 6-week basically crucible that you were put in of like, and to prepare you for the test. Is this like the equivalent of like maybe the bar for lenders?
You know, it was definitely harder than any other test I had taken, harder than the SAT, harder than the ACT at the time. That those were the most difficult tests I had taken. I'm sure that the bar exam is probably harder.
Oh, 100%.
But in that realm of technical and difficult, And so the first 4 weeks were all studying the exam. We were all just learning about mortgage rules, do's and don'ts, laws and regulations. Actually, nothing about originating a loan, just the law itself to pass the exam. And so we took the test on week 4. Everybody passed except for one person. And fortunately, his sponsor, the person that sent him up there, was like, just stay there and learn as much as you can. Everybody else passed. And then we started the last 2 weeks, we actually learned how to do our job, which is interesting. The last 2 weeks, we learned how to prospect.
2 weeks?
Yeah.
That's... Because I've been through this process with you, that's a lot to learn in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Did it feel like you were drinking from a fire hose?
It did, but that's honestly the way I learn is I full immersion and just being completely focused and surrounded by the information I'm trying to consume. Yeah.
So you're like, if I'm going to learn to survive in the wilderness, just drop me off on my own with no help, and I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean it was that type of immersion, and it was actionable, right?
Okay, at least there's that.
One of the reasons I didn't really enjoy school was because most of it was like, I'm never going to use this. And in this context, it was like everything I'm learning is going to be actionable. It's building my new career. It's things I need to become an expert in so I can be the best at what I do. So I was very motivated to learn it and absorb the information.
100%.
Yeah.
So, and then I guess I would ask what came next, but I can guess is like you started working for Academy Mortgage.
Rock and roll. So they finished us up. We learned how to sell in those 2 weeks, sent us back to our respective parts of the country. And they were kind enough, part of this program, and they're taking a big risk on us, really. Part of this program, they allowed us I believe it was 3 months of a salary with a small commission split for any loans we closed. Basically a ramp
Oh, wow.
up. Yes.
Yeah, because well, I guess this is an important note we haven't hit on. Because you're full commission.
100% commission.
So for those of you who may not understand that, he doesn't make money if he doesn't perform.
Correct. Or
if
close.
like he doesn't close, he doesn't make any money.
Because I still may perform, but a customer may choose to go a different route, and then I don't get paid, which is just how it goes.
You've double closed with us. You'll probably triple close because we'll have to get another one going eventually, you know?
There you go. Yeah.
So that's awesome that they gave you that salary ramp up,
Yes.
kind of a cushion to get you into the industry.
Yep.
Which is, I mean, that speaks volume about them as a company because they understand that you have to eat food and that it's
Yeah.
not free.
Yeah. And I was grateful for that, and it worked. I mean, the 3 months I spent doing every single thing I could to build a book of business, to network, and to get my face out and my name out in my community. It did help that my in-laws were in the industry, and while they never gave me a handout, they gave me an opportunity to work. So they would send me leads, which was super helpful. Like, hey, we have somebody that's wanting to build a house. But the downside was they were focused on new construction. New construction takes 6 to 12 months. So they might send me
Yes,
a
it does.
customer. That customer might be happy with me, want to do a loan or get a mortgage through me, and then we have to build a whole freaking house, and then it closes, and that's when I get paid at the very end. So as helpful as it wasn't immediate income, but it got me savvy enough and comfortable enough to have conversations with customers and win over customers. And so, yeah, from there I just pushed as hard as I could, met as many people as I could, I was told by my boss at that time to become a master of my craft, and that still rings true today, even though we didn't get along very often. That was one thing he said to me that stuck. And
Well, I was just going to ask, so would that be the piece of good advice that you got?
yeah, it was very good advice, and it was large. It was surrounded by a lot of bad advice too. And I'll give you an example. That office in particular was a very high producing office for the area, and it was known for A+ customers, A+ credit, easily qualified individuals.
Got it. So like there was a certain, you guys may have not put this together yet, but effectively they serviced the bourgeoisie
Yes.
and only.
Yep.
And if you didn't have, like, if you didn't hit their mark, you didn't hit their metric, they're like, oh, well, we
Go see somebody else or go to
we've,
credit
we've
repair.
got a great resource for you that's not us.
Precisely. And what the problem with that, what I learned pretty quickly, was a lot of the loans they were turning down or sending elsewhere, we could actually do. I got into the credit policy guidebook, which is like a guide, the length of the Bible of mortgage rules for how we originate a mortgage. And I thought, well, we can do these loans that are at lower credit scores. They're just harder. And right now I'm just trying to survive. So I don't care.
This wasn't at Academy though, was it?
Yes, at Academy.
Okay. So
Oh, yeah.
I'm just making sure I'm keeping myself straight.
No, you're good. And so what my coworkers saw me doing was working with these B minus, even C credit profiles, saying like, why are you doing this? And I was like, well, we can do these loans. Why wouldn't I do this? And they're like, yeah, but do you really want to be like XYZ mortgage company that was known for doing kind of the difficult loans? And I
Oh,
was
I'm
like,
sorry for helping people get
Well,
access.
Okay, yes. So you're getting the point.
Oh, my
one, you're not
Lord.
helping customers get into their homes. 2, you're not getting paid because you're sending them elsewhere. 3, and this is the part that they couldn't see because they only looked one step ahead. Realtors, which is our major source of business, they send us leads, started realizing the pattern. And
Yeah.
so they stopped sending customers that they didn't think were perfect to this team. And then when you send that customer that's not perfect to another loan officer and they overperform, maybe then you start moving your A+ leads, the people with excellent credit that are, have easy verification of employment and good income. Maybe you start moving those customers to the other loan officer. So it allowed competitors to start slowly siphoning away business because they weren't willing to do the hard stuff. And I recognized that early on, and I was like, I'm going to do the hard stuff. Maybe that's how I can make my niche. And this goes back to me talking about hardship and failure and how you learn. Working in South Texas was like me training with a weighted vest, like running. It built up my skills. It made it very difficult for me to succeed, but I succeeded anyways. And then coming to Colorado, it was like taking that weighted vest off for the first time, and it became much easier to move forward and succeed.
That's so funny. When you get a chance to watch the first episode with Lindsay, I believe it's episode 2 actually, but she said the same thing. She said that the lower income buyers are the ones that will also make or break your business because they will tell their friends, they will tell their families, they will be forever grateful for you because of what you did. And it's so funny because hearing a piece of your story there, like this ties back home. Like your heart, I can imagine that part of this was that your heart was that in Brownsville, you would service those people 100%. And so you got into this situation where they're like, we don't service those people. And you're like, I am those people.
Yeah. Yes.
Like I was those people. Like it probably, I imagine, was like semi insulting for you.
It was offensive, mainly because they were doing so well that they thought they didn't need those customers' business. And I was
That's
like,
so sad.
yeah, not only do I need this business, but I know they need me because I'm going to work hard for them. And it's it's disappointing that people think that way, but I mean, that's how people are sometimes.
So the good advice would be like putting into every single person that walks through the door that's asking for your help, because you never know who's going to be the one. And the bad advice would be just the opposite of that. Is that you're there is no clientele that you're not open to. You
Yeah,
know
100%.
that makes total sense. So we went through the good and the bad advice. I want to get into some more of the secret sauce, and I define it every episode, but the
Yeah.
secret sauce really, in what I consider it, is this part of your story where it's like, what would you have done differently? Did you have anything that blindsided you or took you by surprise throughout your process of becoming a lender?
The demographic in which you work is going to largely dictate your strategy on how you're successful in sales. Um, Interestingly enough, even though I was born and raised in this hometown of mine, Brownsville, I never felt like I fully fit in or like I was fully integrated into the culture and to the people there. I appreciated them, I respected them, but when I moved to a different demographic, to just a different place in the country, a lot of what I naturally was recognized and appreciated more and respected more. And while I could have been successful anywhere, I believe that sincerely.
I believe that too.
Feeling,
just knowing you.
yeah, and just feeling the natural respect and appreciation. It's not to say that the people in my hometown didn't respect or appreciate me, but we were never quite on the same page with like just connecting and trusting for some reason or another. And when I moved to Northern Colorado, something clicked for the better. And I really felt respected and appreciated by my coworkers. I felt respected and appreciated by my customers. And I was just able to be myself, like my full self. And that's what led me to success ultimately in Northern Colorado, in this market.
I'm just trying to think how we could even summarize it. So there's almost like a beauty or like having that acceptance, that confidence in your team,
Yeah.
and the people around you and the people that you're servicing directly translates to success in a way.
It does. And one thing I wanted to mention, because this is a common phrase that's thrown around, you work with people you like and trust. Everybody says that in sales. It's just a common thing. Real estate agents, lenders, everybody in sales tends to say that type of phrase. But I disagree with that phrase. Or I should say that phrase could be turned around. Who are the people that you tend to like and trust in business? And it's the people that can get the job done. And so ultimately, rather than focusing on being liked or even trusted, I just consistently got the job done, whether it was easy or difficult. And then people started to like and trust me. And so I realized it's all about execution, and people respect that here. And I was like, great, that's what I'm good at. So I just kept doing it.
That's so good. I'm happy you brought it up because I've hit on this in the last few episodes, but we are entering back into an era of can you do the job?
Yeah. Yes.
And can you do it well? Winning is going to be cool again. And because winning's going to be cool again, it's going to come down to merit instead of a lot of the other things that have been thrown around in the last 20 years. I think a lot of people are going to have trouble adjusting to that. So I'll just use this opportunity, like for you guys in the audience, be prepared that you need to be good at what you do and you need to desire it and you got to want it. And if you don't, people are going to run past you. So in your story, thinking about everything that we've had up to this point, what was the most challenging part for you? You're so good at what you do. And I know that firsthand. So what was the roadblock that took your knees out or your legs out from under you?
Well, it's that same thing again. Just because you're the best at what you do doesn't mean that people recognize that, right? So
Elaborate.
there's a difference between performance and sales. The best performers aren't always the best salespeople. The best salespeople, often enough, aren't the best performers, and that is very true in our industry as a lender. There's a technical component to what we do that's highly technical, almost to the level of what an attorney does, laws and regulations, and a ton of if else but type situations. And then there's a sales component, how you present yourself, how you communicate. And so ultimately, the biggest challenge was starting off when you first hit the ground as a lender. You have to effectively convince people that you're the best at what you do, and you also have to be the best at what you do, but you're just starting off. So how do you do that? And it's largely fake it till you make it, but it's also read everything you can. It's don't be afraid to take risks. And then I had to do that again. I moved to Northern Colorado. It's a different market. I have to reestablish a network of people that can refer customers to me, that people that recognize my name and that want to do business with me. So I had to do it twice in 2 different markets.
That's so fun.
Those
I
were
bet you love that.
Oh, that was the second biggest challenge, was doing it again in Northern Colorado.
Well, hopefully you're here to stay.
Yeah, I'm not going back anytime soon.
Okay, great. Because we've got business to do.
Yeah.
So the last question of the interview is one of my favorites, and I feel like it's what the audience will get the most out of. If you had to do it all again,
Yeah.
which you just said is the most challenging part,
Oh, yeah.
if you had to do it all again and get yourself back to where you are right now, and you had even if you were talking to a clean slate 18-year-old who knows nothing about what they're doing, what are the key steps that you would tell them, you must do this? Or I would avoid this. Like if you had to build a roadmap to get exactly to where you are, how would you do it and how would you pitch it?
Yeah, well, that actually falls into one of my biggest regrets, which is not starting sooner. So the fact that we're talking about a theoretical 18-year-old is the perfect person to be talking about.
Okay.
I would have started when I was 18 instead of when I was in my early 20s. Take the risk. If you're young, you can afford to fail again and again and again. The stakes go up when you're older, maybe when you're married, maybe when you have children.
When you own assets.
When you have assets, and
Yeah.
so maybe be a little less risk or a little more risk averse then. But when you're young, I mean, you could build an empire and go bankrupt and all collapse, and then in 7 years, your credit's wiped clean. Think about that.
Yeah.
You do that when you're 18, you build your empire at 20, everything goes belly up. And then when you're 27, you have perfect credit again, and you can start fresh and you're still young and spry. Take the risk now. 100% commission job might sound insane to a lot of people, especially that young. But really what it means is that you get compensated more in correlation with your efforts than a salaried position ever would afford you. Salary brings stability, and that's great. And I was raised with a father and a mother that got stable income, and I'm grateful for that.
So was I.
Yeah. But if you want the best return on your investment, which is what you invest in yourself, your skills, your abilities, the best return on your investment is going to be a commission-based job. So take the risk and don't look back.
So take the risk. I love that. And don't look back. And how does one get in? How do they get their foot in the door?
The most practical way to get in is if you probably know somebody in real estate or lending, whether it's an aunt or a friend or a neighbor, talk to them. Just say, hey, I'm interested in this career path. Connect me with a lender. Let me have coffee with them. They'll probably buy you coffee to sit down and just chat about what they do. And they'll invite you to their office. You get to chat with people. They may even have an entry-level position to say, hey, you want to get started, learn all the lingo, and get paid for a year while you're the front desk person or processing loans or doing something. Start that way if you have to. But don't hesitate to jump in. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. That's awesome. I feel like this is the best episode yet. I'm probably going to feel that every single time. But JB, thank you so much for your time, man. I am so grateful to have you here. I know the audience is as well. And I can't wait to have you back.
I'm looking forward to coming back, man.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for watching today's episode of The Secret Sauce with Sean. If you like today's episode, holler at a homie and head over to my channel for episodes just like this one. If you have any questions, comments, or hate, drop them in the section below and hit me up for your shot in the hot seat.